Hi everyone, welcome to another Facebook Live. My name is Jessica Boshin and I am so glad that you are here with us today. And this is what I have learned, and today's topic is about reading rotations. So about 2 days ago I did a Facebook Live about how to set up your groups and how to group for instruction based on assessment data, taking a look at your district assessment data, your assessment data to drill down and figure out what it is that your students need. So you can take a look at that video to learn how to create your groups. Today's topic is more about, now I have the groups created, how do I set up the rotations in my classroom to make the best use of my classroom time, depending on what kind of time you have available to you. So there's a couple different ways you can do it. There's both what used to be called centers, and there's also called a daily 5 structure. And I've used both at different times in my career. Currently what I use is the daily 5 structure, so that's what I'm going to go through right now, and then at the end I will show you how I set up centers, because it's similar in a way in terms of the content of it, but then I did organize them a little bit differently so that kids could be mixed up and rotated with each other. The basic part, or the first part, I guess, in terms of figuring out how to do your rotations is figuring out your time for your rotations. So you've got to figure out how much time you have and then divide that by the number of groups that you have. So my time in my classroom has generally been in the morning. We start school at 8 o'clock and recess is at 9:40. So from 8 to 9:40 is when I generally do my reading groups. At the beginning of the year, we usually do about a 20-minute opening between journal and just sort of framing the day. And so I don't start the groups until about 8:20, but as the year progresses, we get started a little bit earlier. Probably around 8:10 is realistically what it is, but I put 8 o'clock on there. So we just get started a little bit earlier. What you also need to do is just adjust. So your times are going to be a little bit different, of course, but just figure out how many groups you have, the time that you have in minute form, and then divide that by the number of groups you have, and it'll give you the time limit you have for each group. So you will also want to factor in a couple of minutes of travel time between rotations. That travel time will take a little bit longer at the beginning of the year than it will toward the middle and end of the year, but you know, eventually students will get the concept of traveling and moving around to different places. This is a picture up here of, and I'm not sure how well you can see it up there, so I'll give you the blog post that it's in as well, of my group rotations for daily 5. And you'll see 2 different sets of rotations on it. The top one is what I used at the beginning of the year when I had 3 groups, or actually 4 groups, but 3 rotations of the groups. And this is kind of the most convoluted version of it in a way. The bottom one is very, very straightforward. It's for 4 rotations and 4 groups. The way this works is I only did reading groups Monday through Thursday. On Friday we had art and computer time, and we just had other stuff going on, so there wasn't an opportunity in the morning to do our reading groups. So Monday through Thursday, and then on the way that it worked is group 1 was my lowest group, and then group 2 was my next highest, group 3, and then group 4 was my highest group. And so what you'll notice is that I meet with my lowest group every single day. So group 1 is met with every day. Group 2 is met with twice during the week. Group 4 is met with twice during the week, and group 3, maybe group 3 was my next highest group. So those 2 should have been reversed. But what I try to do is meet with my bottom 2 groups more often than my top 2 groups. So I think the 2 and the 3 maybe are reversed on here. But the concept is that certain groups are getting more attention during that time than other groups. The bottom one is pretty straightforward. It's all 4 groups every single day. The color coding on here I can explain on the next screen, but you'll see the rotations are labeled with colors, not the groups, but the rotations. So in this first set, there's a blue rotation, a red rotation, and a green rotation. And then I added the orange one down at the bottom. And the reason for that is because, we have, there we go, we have different devices like computers or iPads that students can use, and so I didn't want every single student at a computer station. So this is a picture of my rotation board, and this is having 3 different rotations. So you'll see a red, blue, and a green rotation up top, and then you can see some of the cards have a little color on the side of them, and those indicate some of them are in the wrong place, but they indicate which rotation those cards go with, because there's only a certain amount of computers or devices in the classroom, so I only printed a certain amount of cards with those colors on them. Whereas something like read to self or read to someone or work on writing, those are somewhat unlimited because you know, I don't care if all of my class is reading at the same time, but we can't have kids arguing over who gets the computer first and all that kind of stuff. So this is a rotation that I use for daily 5, and when I have 4 rotations, I just move these 3 over and then put an extra column in there. I usually make it orange, so that's what that looks like. And then each group, so there's 4 groups, each group has its own bin of supplies that it uses. So it's just where I keep all of the guided reading materials for them, and then each bin has the names of the group on it. I put it on sticky notes so that it's flexible and can rotate with the students. So just the big ideas is figuring out how many groups you have, the time limit that you have for them, and then figuring out how much time you have per group, allotting a little bit of time for rotations or for, you know, travel time in between. But the way that my room works is that my teacher center is one horseshoe table, and at that center is when my groups stay together with me. So my teacher group is pretty constant until I reassess students and mix up the teacher group a little bit. So those groups are always flexible, so I'll reassess about every 6 weeks to 2 months, 2.5 months, kind of depends on the season and, you know, what's going on in the classroom at the time. But the teacher group is what meets with me, and they're only together when they're at that teacher center, which is, I just call it a teacher center actually, with my rotations for daily 5. And when they're not at my teacher center, they're at their other rotations, but they get to choose what rotations they have. They have a teacher center, and then they have to do a read to self. So if they have 3 rotations, 2 of them are chosen for them based on teacher and read to self, and then the other one is a free choice center, and students can choose to do writing, work on words, technology, all that type of stuff. Once students are more familiar with the routine and we have just a little bit more time, and I open it up to 4 stations, we have the teacher center, we have read to self, and then there's 2 choices, but they have to be 2 different stations. So it's like they can't do computers twice. It has to be 2 different things. And at that point, we'll get deeper into work on writing and work on words and all that type of stuff. But as I said, when I put students into groups, I assign my teacher group, and I assign when they do read to self. So they have to do both of those. The other 2 or 1 station, whatever it is that you've decided, whether it's 4 or 3 stations, is a choice station. So if you look back at, let me pull this back, this chart here, you'll see that there is, so if I look at that top row, there's a teacher one, there's a read to self, and then that final one would be empty. And then students would be able to put the card in that slot that they want to. And all students should have a read to self and a teacher station, and then they would be able to choose that final station that they have there. I have a form that I can put up on my site that is the groups, and you might have seen this the last time that you were here with me, if you were here with that reading one, where I talk about group 1, group 2, group 3, and group 4, and creating those groups. You'll notice the form has more space at the bottom because I generally have more kids in those spaces. And then down at the bottom, of course, is the chart that you saw a little bit earlier that has all of the rotations on it on the side, and then when I'm meeting with each group. So I will put the link to the website address in the notes at the bottom once once this is done and I have a second to do it. Some of you use Daily 5 for your rotation sort of framework, and some of you like using centers. And there's no just hard and fast rule of one or the other. It's what works best for your classroom. I'm going to show you what I did when we taught with centers, and one of the things I like about Daily 5 is that the students can work independently and with another partner. One of the center rotation that I'm going to show you, it's kind of convoluted, and it might take like a blog post for me to really explain it in depth to you. But what I was able to do with it is keep my teacher center all together, and then when they went out to the other centers, they were mixed up with other students. So let me show you what that looked like, and I'll just use a whiteboard. There's students going down the side, so all student names. And then on the piece of paper that I would use, and I would just use a piece of notebook paper and divide it, there were 4 columns. There was center A, B, C, and D, and I would have 4 centers. You can do this with more, it just gets a little more complicated. A center was always my, actually, did I do it this way? I think that these were rotations, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4. I always had 4 rotations, and then 4 centers, A, B, C, and D. There we go. A was always my teacher center. I think B was a word work center, C was a grammar center, and D might have been a mix between computers and something else, because we only had 2 computers at the time. So I definitely had to have something else that students were doing. But I'm not 100% sure what it was, because it was quite a while ago. But the way that I would organize this is I knew which students I was going to meet with first, and it was my lowest group. My highest group I met with last. So it was still in the same order in terms of groups, but I would distribute this A to different places. See, these would be rows of students. I don't know if that's apparent in there. I would distribute that A across different places depending on what group the student was in. And then I would have, let's say I had 5 students in my lowest group, there would be 5 A's in that column. And let's say I had 5 students here, and we'll just make them all even, although that really wasn't the case in the classroom. But I would distribute the A's throughout, so that that was my constant center. That was my teacher center. It was the one that was the same, and everyone, it was the, how do I put it, homogeneously grouped center. The rest of the groups were heterogeneously grouped, and the only consideration I put into that was keeping certain students away from other students, just for social behavior reasons and making sure that students got along when they were sitting next to other students. So I would somewhat randomly just distribute, I guess I'm missing an A in this column here, just distribute the rest of the letters and make sure that there was an even distribution to them. C, D, D, C, C, D, C, D, C, D. This does take a little bit more work to set up. Down at the bottom, I would always tally and make sure that my other centers were somewhat even, so that students weren't, there weren't too many students at one center for just management reasons. It was a small classroom. But this way, I had like activities at each center, and so they had to do the given activity at the center. It wasn't open. This took a little bit more work to set up, and it also took more work on my part to make sure that the activity at each center was there each week. Doing Daily 5 now with the reading rotations, most of the stations that the students do don't take a lot of work to set up. They've, I set them up at the beginning of the year. I introduce them, show students how to do the work, work on writing or use their iPads, or work on words is another one. And so if I show them how to do them, it doesn't take as much work throughout the year every week to set them up. Whereas doing centers takes a little bit more work. It's both work for you, both get at the result of having a teacher center that is grouped by student ability levels that you can work individually with a small group. So they both get you that result. One of them will set up a little bit more independence for you, and a little bit less teacher time. This one is a little bit more controlled. You can see what students are doing in each group, and students are expected to be at that table, and it's probably, it may be a little bit easier to manage depending on the kind of kids you have in your classroom, but both of them get to the end goal of having a small group of students that you work with in reading. And so whether you set it up like a daily 5 structure or like a center structure, the goal is that you are working with groups of students on their reading, and that those students who you're working with are grouped based on their reading level. So I don't see any questions in the group, but I will definitely post links to everything and make sure that I answer any questions if there are any that come up. So I just want to thank you again for being here with me, and have a great rest of your Thursday. Bye.